there's something very special about Yosemite, and all of us here in this room know that. That's why we're here, and I'm really honored to be the connector of all these people here and worldwide. You know, we come here because this place is amazing, and we all share this passion. And so, yeah, after 40 years of climbing, I think that's probably the best thing about my life, is that I've gotten to see so many places and share these experiences with people. And I think that although climbing has changed and we've become a huge population of people, that's even more reason to work with the National Park Service. And that's one of the great changes that I've seen here in this valley, is that we're working together now and cleaning up the park and showing respect and working together. So cooperation and respect are really important. And Dean Potter, many of you guys miss this guy. I miss him so much. So coming into the valley, really fun. Yes. And passionate, trying to push himself, mostly competitive, but just trying to go as far as he could go. And also, it's not a great picture, so he sent this to me from a Patagonia meeting when my son Owen was just born. And Dean and Owen were born on the same day, April 14th. So, it was a little bit awkward, I must say, at first. But they both had that grit. And this was birthday number 2. So that's Dean and Timmy O'Neill and Brad the dad. Brad, who used to live here in the valley and hung out with those guys a lot. And that's actually how I met Brad. He was even cooking at the Awani Hotel. So I'm going to just basically narrate the story of my life in video form. So I started out in Michigan. My father was an aerospace engineer, and my mother was actually a dental hygienist. They moved to Southern California to raise us because of my dad's job. So my poor mother had to deal with driving us around to different sports and running the household. I did a few normal sports, not many. But the best thing about growing up in my family was just being able to go out to all these places. My parents were pretty young when they had us. Like, my mother was 20 when she had her first child. So I loved growing up and climbing trees. I didn't know anything about climbing officially, but this was my mother's words. She climbs the monkey bars like a pro. That was what she wrote in the baby book. But actually, gymnastics was the best thing for preparing me for the climbing of today. That's my brother Bob, who showed me how to rappel. This is in Mount Baldy. So that was my very first time at 13. And then on one of our family camping trips, here we are coming through the Wawona Tunnel, and when I saw this view of the valley, I was just completely awestruck. And again, I didn't know anything about climbing. It wasn't part of my culture growing up. There weren't ads out there with people challenging rock wall and things like the Google campaign, which is excellent out there. I don't know if you've seen it, the Google's Map, or Google Map program. So there's 3D photographs of El Cap, and Eric Sloan was one of the people up there, and Dave Allthree, the rigging, yes. That happened earlier this year. But yeah, so 1974, that's the year that I first saw this National Geographic magazine. 3 years later, I ended up in the same place that I'd seen in the magazine. And thank God my parents knew nothing about what I was doing. So I was really lucky to actually have an older sister. She was 5 years older than me, and her boyfriend, the guy in the middle here, saw an ad in outdoor sports store about how to learn to rappel. So he basically took my sister, my brother, and then eventually me climbing. Of course, my first climb was on the lead because my sister was afraid of leading herself. So she just like pointed up and said, "Here's the gear, now you go." So obviously we had a whole generation of climbers beforehand who've done some amazing things in the valley. Will Robbins, Yvonne Chenard, yeah, just a whole cast of characters. But there wasn't really much about climbing technique. And actually that's something that I'm working on right now is a video trying to explain how it is I see the rock and try to pass that on to other people. But here's the heritage of the progression of style that went from the pitons to clean climbing and just the whole idea of conservation that we have today. Conservation of the rock, trying to leave no trace. Things that we took to a great extent as far as like really being pure, the ground up approach. If you fell, you had to lower back to the ground. You couldn't even look at anything. No hang dogging, none of that stuff. So my brother-in-law, who you saw earlier, we taught my sister and my brother and myself at least the basics of climbing. He was really more of a mountaineer, and he ended up going to Aconcagua when I was pretty young and never came back. So that kind of left a big impression on me as far as mountains. So I pretty much stuck to rock climbing and my culture, my people. We were goofballs. We liked to heckle each other, and that is really a part of how I grew up. Is making fun of each other. And by the way, some of these characters that you're seeing, like Fidelman, Rick Kashner, John's not here, Yabo unfortunately is not here, but those two that I mentioned earlier are here. So we hung out and played hacky sack and made plans and really trusted each other. And most of all, we trusted ourselves to take responsibility for our own choices. And yeah, there were a lot of people that soloed. Rick knows about some of that. Rick Kashner actually did some soloing in Joshua Tree and in Yosemite and had a few falls, but he survived it.
Yeah, Rick!
This is my friend Mari Gingrich. She's awesome. Mari has been climbing probably a little bit longer than me.
Yeah.
She was my partner on the nose, on the shield. We didn't know anything about what we were doing. We just had like gear. John Gill, famous boulder, who actually was way ahead of his times. He influenced a lot of, inspired a lot of us about what could be done on boulders. So back in the day, we would come to Yosemite, and obviously we do the big walls, and we lived in the dirt, of course. But we did all forms. Bouldering was a great way to hone our skills and push each other. We didn't have the crash pads. John Backer, everybody. He was the master of just looking so solid when he was free soloing, and he was the first guy that committed to this lifestyle. We all thought it was kind of crazy. You're going to live as a climber and that's it? But a lot of people did respect and copy that. John Jablonski, Peter Croft, who obviously still is around and doing a lot of climbing and free soloing. Doesn't make a big deal about it, but John Backer at one point did offer a $10,000 reward for anyone who could follow him for a full day of free soloing. But not even Yabo followed him on that one. I think he knew better, because Backer just had the circuit wired, and he would live out there, all week long, and we would all kind of migrate from the city on the weekends, and just hated going back into the city, back to our lives, because we lived for the weekends and these times when we could push ourselves on the rock and hang out with our friends and feel free. And I think that's one of the best things about climbing for me, is just that whole connection to the community, but also a way to check into with yourself and see how you're dealing with risks. Okay, so this is archival footage from, the circa early 80s. I guess you could say it's sort of reality TV in its beginnings, and I saw it as a way to make a living sort of through climbing. Just these random things that came about. That was my sister in the background. So I made $4,000 climbing over a hot air balloon in 1980. Johnson, who was my role model as a climber, called me up and said, "Hey, would you like to be a part of this competition?" And of course, yes. Part of it actually happened here in Yosemite, and that's Tony Nero, another climber. Yeah, we were desperate to earn the money, do anything. But actually, this event actually got me into training for a track, because I wanted to be aerobically fit, and I knew if I wanted to beat some of these women that were in the competition, I had to be fit. My friend Beth Bennett, she lives in Colorado, where I live now. That's in Boulder, and she still climbs. She's still a really excellent climber. At the university. So back then we didn't have climbing gyms, so John Long was my boyfriend at the time. He's like, "Lynn, you should try breaking the world record in the bench press." And I'm like, "Oh, really? It's only 150 pounds. Well, by the time I lifted that, they were taking steroids and the weight went up, but I started getting really big arms, so I said, never mind. So instead we just hit the road, and we did go as far east as Colorado on that trip, and pushed the level a little bit for us. And I have to say, John is one of these people that is really, he's loud and he's big, and he's just a charismatic guy. And he'd just say, "Hey, Liddy, you should just try this." And I'd be like, "Sure." And it usually worked out. And I think that's one of the things that we learn as climbers, is that if you really want to do something, that's in Vegas, on limitations right now. Yes, I had my down and out days in Vegas too. But yeah, if you really want to do something and you do what's required to work. Did I stop that? No. Anything is possible. And here's another character. So this is Wolfgang Gulick, who is famous for doing the hardest routes at like 3 different levels, all the way up to Action Direct, which actually is probably 9A. But I met him when I was in Yosemite, and he'd given me this picture of this guy, that picture, in fact, of Baron Arnold. And I was impressed to know that these guys were climbing barefoot. They didn't use any kind of removable protection devices. They could stand on each other's shoulders, put in rolls. But very strict standards. No chalk either, because they were trying to protect this area in Elbsandstein, Germany. And also, you couldn't ever climb anything that wasn't a freestanding tower. And that's because maybe you could have gotten to the top and top roped it. So to get off, a lot of times you do these jumps. And so it's pretty dangerous. You can see why it's lost its popularity. But he was an inspiring person. And actually, John Backer and Mike Wiklinski, who's Mari Beanery's boyfriend, still 45 years later, they got invited to Constantine, Germany. So that was before the internet, before people really knew what was going on in Europe. And so there were characters from different places going there. But Backer, probably at that time, was the best in the world, I would say, or one of. It's hard to ever say the best. Ron Fawcett from England was another one. Heinz Mariacher actually he's from Austria, but he lives in Italy. Kurt Albert, who coined this term red point as modern sport climbing terminology. Anyway, those were some of the events that eventually impacted my life. So as I moved eastward, said ciao bello, ciao babe, I moved to New Paltz, New York, kind of by chance. It was, you've ever seen that poster that Patagonia made way back when? It's a picture of me having fun. Well, that picture brought me to New York directly for an interview. And I ended up meeting this cast of characters back in the Bad Lifer days. Actually, I think that's coming back in style. Yeah,
Always.
It's okay. You can actually see your feet a little bit better, and it had its virtues. But anyway, so this was back in 1980, 83, when I moved to the Gunks. And it was another evolution of trad climbing on a little bit more complicated rock, because Yosemite has a lot of vertical rock, but not a lot of horizontal features, and a lot of places where you don't get really small gear. So I learned how to use double ropes and sometimes kind of sketchy gear. But that was all part of the game, is push yourself as far as you're willing to go with the protection that you have. And then there was characters like Tony Anero, who, well before anybody knew what 513 was, he was, making maps of the moves and trying to figure out all this stuff. But in that time period, this says the devil is a hangdog. That was, not really an acceptable practice. But as a gymnast, I realized that, if you want to get good at something, you do have to practice, and you're not going to do it the first time. If it's really something great, you've got to try it a lot, and you've got to get good at failing and be patient. So this was a long story, this route vandals, but I'll just say that I got kind of roped into getting the route started because it was sketchy gear and they had skyhooks taped on the rock. So it was a controversial route. This is, in 1986, there was a great debate in Denver. They had this Alpine Club meeting. So you've got the cast of characters. I was literally in a white dress in the middle of all the men. And we're there to discuss, the ethics of bolting and hangdogging. At the same time that all this stuff was going on in Europe. So there was this big revolution of style. And though I respected Henry Barber, also respected the barefoot techniques in places like Elphinstone, we had these new sport climbing areas like Smith Rocks, and they were getting developed, and the level was getting pushed to a much higher degree as far as physical strength that was required. Not so much the technical stuff, because I still think Yosemite has some of the most difficult, like slab climbing, like really complicated stuff to figure out. But at that time, I was sort of moving eastward and discovering this whole new world of competition with banners everywhere. And I was invited to the first competition as a result of going on an exchange from the American and French Alpine clubs. So I got to meet a lot of these famous European climbers, and I'd heard about Capitan because she'd won the very first competition that they had in 1985. And so this is in 1986. It was very strange for me. I didn't understand limestone at all. And it was really weird to see all these spectators. They were chopping down trees and sometimes putting sika on the rock. Wow, this is way different as far as the environmental approach. But I loved a lot of the aspects of the European culture, the food, people, the limestone. And in 1990, I actually moved to France just because it was just a whole new realm to discover. And they embrace climbing in a different way than we do here. It's more like performance art. So these guys perform this choreographed team. And they're sort of supposed to be blues brothers. That's actually a really cool film. There's a longer version of it. It's called Grand Prairie Étoile.
Maybe now in the south of France, many are good and many are good climbers.
Even America's climbing stars Lynn Hill
and Ron Cow is the cowboy. As Capitan bowed out of the competition last night, Isabelle Patissier stepped into her shoes as France's hottest number.
It was very good for us to train these conditions. You can see why climbing has a lot more sex appeal in France. How can you win so many competitions? It's such a competitive field of climbers.
Because I'm trying, yeah, because I've done a lot, and on a lot of competition I can win some.
So now his wife is Robin Herbstfield, and they have a climbing team in the U.S. They're like #1 in the nation. So he went on to build some amazing walls. Oh, you should hear Jerry though, race car driving. Oh, he's talking about the head that you have to have.
All the time I have to say, calm myself down, concentrate, and panic's very common.
So yeah, so climbing competitions came to the U.S. Pretty much 1989, and the beginning of the walls weren't really that interesting. They were kind of flat, not a lot of detail. So I had a dramatic fall, and actually it was poetic justice. Mari and I came in second, and that's probably the only time she ever competed. And I still keep in touch with Mari. We talk about the way climbing has changed, and in some ways it's changed a lot, and in other ways I think that the spirit of climbing is the same. You know, we like to be challenged, we like being out there in the world in beautiful places. Even though climbing competitions are not aesthetically beautiful in that same way, I think they're a nice addition to the opportunities for people, you know, access-wise. And for me as a single mom, I can go to the gym and, you know, in the time that my son is going to school. But this is where my passion is. It's outdoors on natural rock. So in 1989, actually, I almost lost my life. I took a fall in Gunks. I thought I was tied in. It's a long story. My shoes were off to the side, and I had a jacket on, and I didn't finish tying my knot because I was going to go get my shoes. And I ended up getting to the top of this cliff, like 72 feet, and I fell. And luckily hit a tree and didn't die. But you know, it did make me think about meaning in my life, and you know, felt very lucky to be alive, and really relatively unscathed. You know, there's a little bit of a scar on my back. So anyway, I healed from that. I was psyched to climb still. And it was John Long who actually said, "Hey, Linny, you know, now that you've retired from competitions, you should go up and reclimb El Cap." And so, you know, there's some history of the women before. And Miriam Underhill, you know, she wrote something in National Geographic, and this guy wrote something like, "The Great Pond has disappeared, and it's a shame too, because it used to be such a good climb. Now that it's been done by 2 women alone, no self-respecting man can do it." So it was like ridiculous. So, but you know, things have changed. Manless alpine climbing. But you know, history has to start somewhere. Yeah, if women truly lead, they have to be a team of women, is what she wrote in that article too. And so in 1973, Bev Johnson and Sibylle Hegel climbed El Cap by triple direct, and that was definitely inspiring. And then their article was untitled because Sibylle wanted to say walls without walls. And they said, no, you can't name it that. How about keeping abreast on El Cap? But Mrs. Beverly, she soloed the dihedral wall. It took her 10 days. in 1978, and I was like, wow, that is so cool. There's a woman out there doing this, and then, of course, I met her with the survival of the fittest. She was an amazing woman. Unfortunately, she died in a helicopter accident in 1994. She was, just one of these people that never made a big deal about being a woman. She just was like, she loved climbing. So that's why when I saw this paragraph, women are conspicuously absent from the pages of the climbs in this book, I thought, well, maybe we shouldn't be ignored for what we're not doing, but we should be seen for what we are doing. And so that was a big motivation. It wasn't my only motivation, because I think that certainly growing up as a tomboy, I really wanted to, disprove this idea that we were, something was wrong with us or we were lacking something. I thought it was actually a good thing to be good at sports, but a lot of people didn't like that. This is a famous John Muir. He's just an amazing person. Some of the things that he's written about the park and the beauty and just the preservation is definitely respectable. So yeah, the evolution of the gear, the Dole Tower, the stove legs, pitons that were handcrafted, all this stuff really made the nose climb much more meaningful. I think that's why people come from all over the world to do this route. It's right up the middle of El Cap, and just knowing how these guys had to persevere, and we heard the stories tonight from Chantel and Sky about just, how you have to really push yourself sometimes beyond what may seem reasonable, because you just got to get it done. You got to rise to whatever level that is. So that was part of my motivation for climbing the nose. Of course, I did it first in '79, I think, with Dean Fidelman and Mari Newbury. And I, of course, was leaning over to get something and kicked the food bag off, so that was the first food that we had all day at the summit. Jessica, who was Dean's girlfriend, hiked up just a few little goodies for us. And then this is Hans Floring, who convinced me to come and do a speed ascent, although I don't consider myself fast at all. I'm more of a slow but sure type. But we managed to do it in 8 hours and 15 minutes, and that was respectable. I was following, he was doing it in the blocks. I'd never heard about all this block stuff. But yeah, it was great to be able to be basically guided up El Cap by Hans Floring. So now this is the story of basically Simon Naden, who I met the very first year he went to the competitions on the World Cup circuit. He won. Why? Because he's an amazing climber, really cool guy, soft-spoken, but he knows how to trad climb, and especially that technical stuff on gridstone. And he's an adventurous guy. He'd never done anything like El Cap, and I happened to run across him. It's actually a long story of why I didn't have a partner. I had partners that came and went, but he agreed to do it, and we did a pretty good job. We almost did everything, but we failed at the changing corners and the last pitch. So he flew back to England and teamed up with my good friend Rick Sandel, who actually had, we're setting ropes to check it out, and also the following year I came back with the film team. So you're going to see a little bit of a hodgepodge of stuff here. So this is Brooke and I in 1993 working it out. We spent 3 days figuring out the changing corners pitch. Had to take out a piton, a little broken off piece of piton, because that was the key down in the beginning, at least for the way I do it. Brooke did everything but those 2 pitches free, and the great roof and the changing corners pitch. But he was happy to be supportive and help, with the ascent. Oops, did I do anything wrong? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so after doing the first free ascent in '93, I decided to come back. That's where I lived in France, by the way. That's where I trained for the nose, ironically. And that's my partner, Steve Sutton. Starting out, actually, the first time I tried, I failed. This was a failed attempt. But anyway, the training ground for me was climbing as much as possible. 20 pitches a day on limestone, just get tired, and then train on I have a little wall. I finally made an artificial wall. This is Warren Harding. You don't hear his voice because actually at 11 o'clock in the morning he was already drunk. But it was fun to hang out with him. He's a sweet man. He was pointing the, El Cap, saying random stories here and there. But anyway, this is the lower part, very technical. So my whole background of climbing the Joshua Tree on that technical stuff all played a part. The training and competition head, living over in Europe, that also was helpful because when the time comes when you have to perform and succeed, it really helps to have some of those skills. And so what you're seeing here is a great move with drug sections there. I'm actually just kind of figuring out the moves before trying to red point it in a lot of this footage. So Jim Surrett, this was his very first film shoot. He's now a videographer, and that's what he does. So there's Jim Bidwell, and there was a crew of French people. This is me producing the film, because at the last minute, my American producer bailed out. So, I had to do everything from cook food at the top, even for the French people, although when they bailed, they thought it was too scary to wreck down. They ended up cooking. So that was pretty good. The one-day ascent, that's the famous Houdini and the changing corners. It was really to add some excitement and make it a real challenge for me personally, because I'd done it all three the year before. But to do it all three in a day, especially when your partner predicts it's belay of ice, it's a much different challenge. And in fact, I didn't make stuff. I had this tiny little chalk bag, a sport climbing chalk bag. What was I thinking? And we didn't have anything spare. I'm kind of a minimalist, so we didn't have any extra chalk. This is at the top after I failed.
What? Yeah, I tried very hard in the great group. I got to almost the last move crossing under, and each time, in the beginning my foot slipped. Made a few errors. I had no chalk, and it was scorching hot. We had very little water. So in between tries, came down to the belay, sat in the sun, and each time I'd go up and I'd try to get some chalk out of my bag, and there was nothing. And my hands were just greasing out of the crack. It was not good planning. A few errors makes a big difference on such a big wall.
Yeah, you really feel small when you're here in the valley. These things are big. And so I tried to kind of tap into that whole Zen mindset, or actually it was Qigong that I'm practicing there. And I met this Chinese guy, and he's like, let's do an arm wrestle. He's like 7 years old. And we weren't going anywhere. He's like, what are you thinking of? Oh, just trying to bring my hand to the table. And he's like, well, what are you thinking of? He said, infinity. So I kind of took that, think beyond the goal, think well beyond the goal, and try to go all the way to the source. So the next time I tried, it was 10 o'clock at night and full moon, so that's power for women too, actually. So that, obviously I wouldn't run into people and have to pass people during the day. It's not very nice, I don't think. And it's cooler, because this was in September, just a little over 20 years ago. So people said that you had to have small fingers to do it, but I don't think that really Tommy would have complained. He only has 9.5 fingers. But actually, it's, everybody, no matter what your size is, sometimes there are advantages being small, sometimes there are not. But I think the beauty of climbing is to adapt yourself, however you are, to the rock.
Yeah.
I did fall. My original intent was to go all three from the ground up. That would have been perfect, right? Would have been a great story, but I fell. There was a couple of falls right here. There's a hanging belay, or you kind of sit there on this crack here, but that's where the business starts. When you arrive at a feature like this, it's a little bit hard to see with this footage because this was taken in 1994, back when the cameras were expensive and not good quality. But anyway, there's not a lot of feature there. So what I was trying to imagine was the opposition, and kind of like that game of Twister, how you can just suspend your body weight and keep moving upward by just really carefully placing your feet and hands and figuring out how to be very delicate. There's the Houdini again.
Unlike a woman.
So, the motivation I was talking about before was not so much to be famous. I never really wanted that. I started climbing so long ago, it was something, nobody would ever pay to climb. That was a ridiculous idea for me. It was because I wanted to be out there for free. It was everything the opposite of that. But I stepped up to the role because I was kind of put there and nominated for speaking about climbing, because I've been climbing for 40 years now, and I challenged the paradigms, and I challenged not just the ones for women, but whoever you are, wherever you're from, we can be bonded by our passion for climbing, and that's the most important thing. It's not what you climb or how hard you climb. Just loving it and loving each other and loving nature. This is Tommy Caldwell and Beth Rodden, who repeated the nose, and also Scott Burke. His dad is here, Leo Burke. Leo! So he's a supporter. So I feel very honored, especially now with all the routes that Tommy has done free, and the people that did the first big wall free ascent, Paul Piana and Todd Skinner, the Hoover brothers from Europe, Peter Croft, all these people. There's so many people to thank for contributing and making this place so special, and all of you for coming, actually. So since then, since like 95, I went to Kyrgyzstan with this crew of people here: Alex Lowe, Greg Child, Dan Osman, Kitty Calhoun, Jay Smith. We went there for 3.5 weeks with no satellite phone. Kitty Capitan was 4 months pregnant. That was kind of out there, I thought. But nothing bad happened, so I was pretty happy. But this was like much bigger for me than Yosemite because you were so far out there. There was nobody that was going to help you. So on this climb, I was really tired. It reminds me of one of Chantel's photos. We climbed for like 36 hours and did the first continuous free ascent of that formation. But it seemed a little... and Alex Lowe, who was an amazing guy, just so full of enthusiasm. He'd get up at 3:30 in the morning and start brewing coffee. Just fancy very fun. Here we did what I call team free. There's, I don't know, some people have different definitions, but for me, the leader free climbs, the follower takes the pig, to Mars, whatever, but not free climbs. And so that would be like team free set for us. So that's my sister and Chuck, who died in the mountains. And this trip to Kyrgyzstan was kind of like for me to see, is this something that I want to keep going in this direction? Or what do I really love? And after a point release avalanche on one of the climbs, just like flying down this slope, I finally could stop myself. And wow, mountains are really serious. But for Beth and Tommy, I think it was early 2000, they went to Kyrgyzstan. They found a danger that they didn't expect at all. You probably heard the story, and Tommy's told it, and we'll tell it again. But yeah, getting kidnapped over in third world countries, these things happen. And Tommy is such a hero. that he saved everybody pretty much. Who knows what would have happened if we hadn't have knocked the gunmen off the slope and they all ran 10 miles downhill to safety. So anyway, after that trip, I decided to focus more on just strictly rock climbing, not so much in alpine environments. And actually, Beth Rodden came on one of these trips in 1999 to Madagascar. She'd never really done much multi-pitch climbing other than Zebra Zion in Smith Rock, which is not really a big trad climb. But after that, she went to Yosemite and met Tommy and learned how to trad climb, and her life changed quite a bit. But then she was only 19 years old, and this seemed really intense, that experience. So I lived in France and Italy and had the pleasure of learning to speak those languages. Even today, I was cleaning up, and it was so peaceful, actually, picking up trash. And I ended up speaking 4 different languages today, just from those experiences. People on the trails. So I've always enjoyed that part of climbing, and just the pretext of meeting people. And so finally, at the age of 42, I had my son who's doing a one-arm pull-up out of the womb. Funny enough, you'd think that everyone thinks he's going to be a climber. I don't know. He tends to pretend that he doesn't like it, but I took him climbing the other day and he said, "This is fun." So this is in Boulder, just defending our town from more coal mines and just all kinds of environmental concerns. And I'm really proud that Patagonia is a sponsor of this event and such an environmental advocate. This is supposed to be 350.org. So thanks to all of the sponsors, but in particular Patagonia for bringing me here. And this is just a parting shot to say that I really hope that all of you guys continue to follow your passions for climbing and help to do your part for the environment and for humanity. That's beautiful. About 1 case of books. So anyone who really wants a book, right now, tonight, I will sign them, I don't know, outside, over there. Okay, so find me outside. And if not, you can go to my website. It's lynnhillclimbing.com. That's pretty easy to remember. And thank you, Ken, for organizing this. Yeah! Mike and the Park Service and everybody who watched it so beautifully. It's a great event, and I look forward to more years coming back. Yeah.